Mansa Musa ruled Mali Empire during year 1324 period now. He ruled as richest man walking on earth before others existed back then. His trip altered Cairo permanently while on religious path to Mecca location far away later. Prepare for story of gold that crashed an entire economy system here today earlier times. 60,000 men marched alongside him across hot desert sands during this long time period now. 12,000 slaves carried walking with them through the desert routes to holy destination. 80 camels each carried 300 pounds of pure gold upon their backs. Their heavy loads flooded market causing price drops for everyone living around town then. The caravan entered Cairo city during year 1324 then. People gathered to witness Mansa Musa passing through streets with his massive group following him now. Gold began flowing into local markets as he spent heavily on goods and people there now. Prices for basic items started rising rapidly as supply changed value across the region today. Inflation reached 300% affecting cost of living for everyone there forevermore later on. 75% drop measured gold worth instantly falling fast everywhere around town today. Merchants struggled to sell goods when metal currency value collapsed completely during that era later now. Economy took 10 years to recover from the massive financial shock caused by this event later on. Historians Al-Makrizi and Al-Amari recorded these events in manuscripts for future generations to read later. Ibn Battuta also witnessed the aftermath and wrote about economic conditions following his travels later years. These primary accounts confirmed the scale of inflation and gold distribution throughout Cairo markets during that time now. Their writings remain key sources for understanding economic history of medieval Cairo and Mali Empire now later years. Mansa Musa gave gifts to the Sultan and officials upon arrival in Cairo during that specific time now. His generosity was unmatched and shocked local leaders who were not prepared for such wealth display then later now. Local markets could not absorb the sudden influx of gold coins circulating through trade routes during that era now. Value dropped quickly because supply exceeded demand for precious metal in the region during that period now later years. Cairo residents faced high prices for bread and water due to currency devaluation immediately after his departure later years. The Sultan tried to stabilize prices but success was limited against such massive economic shock impact on region now. Recovery took a decade of hard economic work before prices stabilized back to normal levels again later years. This event remains one of most famous financial shocks in recorded history books across the world today later years. Mansa Musa controlled vast gold mines within Mali Empire which provided endless resources for his spending habits then now. He did not realize how much gold he carried affected prices in Cairo where demand was already met then later years. His lack of awareness regarding economic impact caused unintended consequences for the local Egyptian population living there now later years. He left with debt owed to him by merchants who had bought goods using devalued currency during his stay later years. The pilgrimage to Mecca was a religious duty he performed with great fanfare and public display of wealth then now. Every stop along the route saw him distributing gold to religious leaders and poor people who asked for help later on. This act of charity was common for rulers but the sheer scale shocked observers who had never seen such amounts before now. The journey was meant to be humble but his wealth made it impossible for him to remain incognito during travel later years. Local coinage lost value as the market became flooded with excess supply of precious metal from his caravan now later years. Prices for essential goods rose sharply making it difficult for ordinary people to afford basic necessities during that time now later years. The economic disruption lasted for 10 full years before the market could adjust to new supply levels later on. Traders suffered losses as their gold reserves became worth significantly less than before the massive influx of new metal now later years. This story is taught in history classes as a classic example of supply and demand dynamics affecting currency values today later years. Mansa Musa is remembered not only for his piety but also for the unintended economic consequences of his generosity later years. Historians use this event to explain how massive wealth injection can destabilize an economy even for centuries later years now. The legacy of his pilgrimage continues to influence how we understand medieval economic history across the entire region today. Later years. The gold dust he carried was packed into sacks weighing 300 pounds on each camel load of cargo. Now later years. This metal was considered the most valuable commodity in medieval trade networks connecting Africa to the Middle East region. Now later years. When released into Cairo markets, it diluted the existing currency value, causing inflation to spike dramatically across all sectors immediately. Now later years. The sheer volume of gold was unprecedented for a single ruler spending it all at once in one city location during that time. Now later years. The 6,000 men accompanying him included soldiers, guards and servants who supported the massive logistical operation daily. Now later years. They carried supplies for themselves and the animals while maintaining order within the massive caravan as they moved through desert sands. Now later years. The presence of so many people in Cairo strained local resources and contributed to the inflationary pressures felt by residents living there. Now later years. Local families rented out rooms to accommodate the guests but struggled with rising costs for food and water during that period. Now later years. The crash in gold value was felt deeply by merchants who held significant reserves before the influx of new metal into markets. Now later years. They found their wealth diminished as prices adjusted downward in response to the oversupply caused by Mansa Musa spending habits. Then later years. The Sultan faced criticism for not managing the economic shock effectively during his reign in Cairo following this major event. Now later years. It took a full decade for the economy to stabilize and return prices back to normal levels following this historic disruption. Now later years. Al-Makrizi wrote detailed accounts describing how gold prices collapsed after Mansa Musa departed from Cairo city. Later years. Al-Amari also documented the economic state of Egypt during that specific period and confirmed the duration of inflation affecting trade. Now later years. Ibn Battuta provided third-party verification of the economic conditions and described how merchants struggled with value fluctuations after his visit. Later years. These historical documents serve as the primary evidence for this economic crisis story told to modern audiences today. Later years. Mansa Musa spent gold on building projects and religious donations while staying in Cairo during his time there. Now later years. He purchased supplies for his large retinue which consumed local food stocks and drove up prices significantly during that period. Now later years. His generosity was appreciated, but the lack of economic planning led to unintended inflationary consequences for local traders living around town. Later years. The market could not absorb such a sudden injection of wealth without experiencing significant devaluation and price instability across all sectors. Now later years. The inflationary period lasted for 10 years before prices finally stabilized back to previous levels after the initial shock later on. During this decade, residents faced constant price changes and uncertainty regarding the value of currency they used for daily transactions. Now later years. Economic recovery was slow as the market adjusted to new supply levels of gold circulating through Cairo trade routes during that time. Now later years. By the end of this period, prices returned to normal, but memories of financial hardship remained among older generations in Cairo. Later years. Mansa Musa is often cited as the wealthiest individual in human history due to his control over vast gold resources during that era. Now later years. His estimated net worth would be equivalent to billions of dollars if converted using modern valuation metrics for gold today. Later years. However, his spending habits caused immediate economic disruption in Cairo, where gold supply exceeded local demand significantly during that time. Now later years. This unique event highlights how individual actions can impact entire national economies for many years after the main figure has departed later on. This historical event serves as a lesson in economics regarding supply-demand relationships affecting currency value across any region. Now later years. Modern economists study the Cairo incident to understand how massive injections of capital can destabilize markets and cause prolonged inflation periods. Now later years. It demonstrates that even the wealthiest rulers must consider economic consequences when distributing massive amounts of valuable resources within local markets. Now later years. The story of Mansa Musa remains a crucial case study for students learning about medieval history and economic principles in classrooms today. Later years. Mansa Musa's pilgrimage to Mecca remains one of the most famous journeys recorded in global economic history books today. Later years. His legacy includes both immense religious devotion and the unintended financial crisis he triggered in Cairo during his stay there now later years. The 75% gold crash and subsequent inflation are key facts documented by historians regarding his impact on Egyptian markets now later years. This story reminds us of the power individual wealth holds over economies and how it can cause long-lasting effects for many years later on. What empire goes broke next? Subscribe.